And with that, let's start with the opening remark. I would like to welcome Dr. Siva, the founder of Trust for Youth and Child Leadership, Associate Director of SAFELab at Columbia University. Dr. Siva is also a social worker, practitioner, and researcher. His research interest is centered around social work, technology, youth, Indigenous communities. I would like to take this opportunity and welcome Dr. Siva to open this session. Welcome, Dr. Siva.
Thank you, Dawood, for your warm welcome and for instructions. I would like to add this recordings will be shared with the UN, and the proceedings also will be shared with the UN for their record. So thank you once again, and vanakkam. Good morning and good evening and good afternoon, everyone, everywhere you are in the world, and happy World Book Day. And welcome to United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, a virtual panel discussion on COVID-19 and digital divide. Indigenous Youth Voice for Resilience, organized by Trust for Youth and Child Leadership. Let me start with my sincere land acknowledgement to Susquehannock, the native people of this land. And though I come from a different parts of the world, right now I need to respect this ancestral the land and their efforts and their right to land. And thank you to all the Susquehannock and my ancestral energy to lead and blessings from them. So it's my great pleasure to welcome all our panelists from India, US, Canada, and Kenya, especially Honorable Member of Parliament, Dr. D. Ravikumar from our own constituency of Villupuram, India, and proud to be part of the same constituency, and he's been excellent in the way he's looking at the issues of Indigenous people as well as modern technology, and the way he balancing the both, it's very, very important. And he's a very, more than a politician, he's a thought leader, he's a writer, and he's been initiating a most important conversations in the parliament as well as with the people. That's what inspires me personally to invite him on the panel. And I'm very grateful for having you here, sir. Thank you so much for joining us today. And yeah, basically I'm from Chennai, Villupuram, from Vanur block and Villupuram district. So we shared the this moment, and then where we have a less educated population and a more indigenous population in the state. So I think your presence and your inputs will add a lot more value, as well as how we can collectively improve this, addressing this digital divide gap in our own constituency and beyond. It's very, very important. Thank you once again. And my friend and Indigenous people's right activist, Ms. Tai from US. She's representing the Taíno community, and Ms. Makasa from Canada, Makasa Looking Hearts from Canada, and Dr. Susithra from the Hindu India, of Chennai, India, and our youth representatives, Kamatchi from Aathiyan community, and she's not living very far away from our Member of Parliament in Vanur. And the Miss Cindy from Kenya is going to join us soon, and our colleagues from Pondicherry, India, and today's moderator Dawood from Egypt, and the technical assistants, Kartika from Indonesia. We have like a very diverse people from across the globe is joining today to discuss on this important issue. The digital divide, digital equity, and digital accessibility are not a new concern for Indigenous people. The COVID-19 crisis reinforces the social inequality for Indigenous people in education, health, employment, access to information, communication, and social exclusion. It also forces them to lose their land and basic human rights. So the COVID-19 lockdown just not amplify the digital divide, it is escalated social disparities and exclusions in the society. It raises the question of who's getting work from home to fulfill their family survival needs, and who has access to education online, electronic devices, access to quality internet. Even someone offers the devices, how many of indigenous communities have sufficient knowledge to access online services? Who has healthcare access, e-medicine? Why rich indigenous knowledge is not recognized yet? How many indigenous languages are available online to access information and communicate online? And how many indigenous people and communities are participating in the science and technology innovations? There's a vast majority of the people are completely away from the digital world. And there are more unanswered questions that needs to be answered and discussed. Today's discussion will be a stepstone to initiate such conversation with the local and global communities. Pandemic has not just caused a digital divide, it is an elevation of a new socio-economic divide. We need to take collective affirmative action to address this gap. TYCL is going to launch a village innovation and incubation lab in indigenous community to prepare a next generation innovators from indigenous families. TYCL also will continue to work with the UN systems and member states to address this socio-economic divide in the post-pandemic situations. With this commitment, I once again welcome you all to this great panel discussion, and thank you, and over to Dawood.
Thank you a lot, Dr. Siva, for delivering this opening remark. We appreciate your commitment and dedication to trust for youth and child leadership. With that, and without further ado, I would like to welcome the first speaker in this event, Honorable Ravikumar. Ravikumar is a member of Parliament in India. He is also a writer and advocate. So please join me welcoming Dr. Ravikumar.
Thanks to all. First, I would like to thank Mr. Siva Mathiyazhagan for giving me the chance to participate in this event. And also, I want to express my thanks to Susithra, Kowsalya, and Kamatchi, Tai, and the moderator, Dawood Mayom. India is struggling for oxygen. Hundreds of people are dying desperately in hospitals without oxygen. They are sending SOS messages, sharing messages in social media. I've seen a message. A person from Uttar Pradesh who didn't know the social media, didn't have any Twitter or Facebook account, lost his mother without any medical assistance because he doesn't know how to locate a hospital with a bed. So the people who has the Twitter accounts or Facebook accounts or WhatsApp, they're sharing the availability of beds or oxygen facility, and they comparatively they are in better position to save the lives of their relatives or friends. So the digital divide is killing people in pandemic situation. Yes, education is the oxygen to the Dalit people and indigenous people all over the world. Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar rightly pointed out that education is the only way to survive in this casteist country. But after independence, the governments who rule the country, they have allotted crores of money to educate the poor people, particularly Dalits and Adivasi people in India. But still, there is a wide gap between the literacy level of others and Dalits. Almost 10% gap is there between the literacy level of SC/ST people and others. In my constituency, Siva Mathiyazhagan also belongs to this constituency. In Villupuram, there is 17% gap between male and female literacy. So this kind of imbalance, the gap is so discriminating a large population in getting jobs or other advancements. So we are struggling, we are raising our voices in Parliament and outside of Parliament to bridge the gap, to increase the level of literacy, the Dalit people and indigenous people. But the ruling government, the BJP government, they are slowly reducing the budget for education. They have introduced national education policy, which promised 6% GDP to education. But in this budget, 21-22 budget, they have reduced the allocation from the previous year's allocation. So the policy is at one side, it's only in paper, but in practice, they are slowly chasing away the downtrodden people from formal education. This is their plan, chasing away the large population from formal education is their plan. The national education policy clearly plan for this. They encourage non-formal education. They encourage people, particularly the downtrodden people, to study in non-formal forms. So they are cutting the scholarship, the fellowships to the Dalits and Adivasis. Only after our intervention in the Parliament, now they have extended the scholarship scheme for further 6 years. But they have downsized the amount of allocation. So their intention is very clear. They want to make the downtrodden people illiterate because they know very well they can rule the illiterate people easily. So knowledge will give them strength. They know very well. That's why Dr. Ambedkar struggled for giving education to Dalit people. Now the pandemic, it came as very handy to the rulers because it helps them to achieve their plan very easily. The pandemic situation, they have closed all the schools, not only private schools, also government schools, from elementary to college level, and ask the students to learn online. India is the second largest country which has internet access in the world. Nearly 600 million people have internet access here. But this 600 million is only 50% of the population. The survey made by the government states that near about 89% of population has no internet facility in their homes. More than 76% of people has no computers in their home. Also, most of the people doesn't know how to use a computer or how to use internet. So there is a big gap between rural and urban also. People who are living in urban areas can get better internet access, but in rural areas there is no internet facilities. In my constituency, when I travel, I even didn't get the phone signals. Most of the areas of the Villupuram district still has no mobile facility, mobile signal facility. That is BSNL, the government company, or other private players. In my office, which is in the area of Auroville, I got a connection of BSNL, the government internet facility, but there is no phone signal available in the area. I can use only the internet, but I cannot use the phone, mobile phone facility there. These are situation in most of the areas of my constituency. So in my house, I am sitting in my house now. It's in Pondicherry. So I got two internet connections. One from a private player, CherryNet, and another one from government BSNL. But still, I'm struggling to get enough signal. So most of the time, the signal is very poor. So people like me are struggling to get the proper internet facility. How can a poor student living in a remote village learn his lessons through online? Most of the students, more than 80% of the students, poor student, has no computers or tablets or laptops. So they mostly use mobile phone. So even in the areas where the signal is available, the internet facility is available, the cost for the digital data is also very high. If a student spends 5 hours for 5 days in a week, has to bear almost 900 rupees per month for this internet facility. 900 rupees a month is a big amount for a poor family. If a family has 2-3 children, then they cannot afford that much amount for the education of the children, because most of the Dalit families and Adivasi families, they admit their children mostly in government school. Here in Tamil Nadu, the Adi Dravida Welfare Department, a department meant for Dalit students, and they run more than 1,100 schools, hostels. Nearly 1 lakh students are studying there. So these students has no proper place to sleep in their home. Even the family is not that much rich to provide 2 sets of dress to the children. So the government is providing uniforms to children in the government schools, Adi Dravida welfare schools and tribal welfare schools. Even they are depending upon the government for uniforms or dresses. How can they spend 900 rupees per month? How can they spend 10,000 rupees to buy a mobile phone or a laptop or a tablet? It's unimaginable. So I see in my constituency and other places of Tamil Nadu, most of the students have completely become dropout. Technically, they are studying in their classes because the government is running the school now only online. They are giving promotion to the students, all pass to all students in each class. So they are promoting from one standard to another standard, but they are in reality, they are completely dropped out from education. Already a huge dropout is there in the school level. The studies conducted by the government shows very well, clearly, nearly 50% of students dropped out after 5th standard. And almost 80% of students dropped out after the higher secondary level. A huge gap between higher secondary and college education shows the dropout rate is very high in that stage. The dropout, the reason for the dropout are very many. So migration is one of the important reason for the dropout, because the parents are migrating from one place to another place, searching jobs. So they cannot give a proper education to the children. So the dropout level at the school, the primary level, is because of the migration of the parents. And also poverty contributes a major share in dropout. Now the pandemic also become a major reason for dropout. The pandemic situation forced the Dalits and indigenous people to come out from formal education. It's very, very serious one. After 2-3 years, we'll see most of students, most of the young people from these communities become illiterate. The illiteracy among these communities will be very big in the coming years. So we have to plan serious programs for bridging the gap. So giving them access to internet or giving them access to mobile phone or laptops is not enough, because in their home there is no proper condition for learning, because most of the people has no proper home. They cannot learn anything in that situation. That's why formal education is very, very essential for these people. So we have to force the government to find different ways to address the needs of the Dalits and indigenous people. The online education will not help. See, here in India, particularly in Tamil Nadu, they are running liquor shops without any obstacle, but they have closed all the schools. It's very, very unacceptable. We have to organize community schools with all these precautions, wearing masks and the distancing, physical distancing, everything. But without formal education, we cannot educate Dalit students and Adivasi students. So giving facilities or instruments for online education is not a solution. Giving them formal education in a school-like condition is the only solution. That is the way out for the Dalit people and indigenous people. So we have to chalk out programs to force the government to give the formal education to these section of people, whether it is in the school premises or in community areas. Because one Professor Kalyani, who is working among the Irula tribes in Tindivanam, he has organized, he is running a school, a Tai Pelli in Tindivanam. It's a free school for tribal people, and other Dalit people are students also studying there. And he conducted classes in various streets where the students are coming from with the help of the teachers. But when I approach the government school teachers, they are not ready, because they are not committed to educate the students. Without the intervention of the government, you cannot force them to educate the students in their areas. Some teachers who are self-motivated, they are doing a great work like this. But most of the teachers are roaming around without any work. They are not worrying about the future of the student, future of the children. They are enjoying this pandemic as a vacation. So the proper intervention is necessary to give formal education to Dalits and indigenous people. This is my suggestion. Thanks for listening to my brief speech. Thanks to all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Ravikumar, for sharing with us your kind words and your speech, which touch upon the gap in digital divided that's facing not only indigenous youth, but also indigenous community in India. And also you also address what has been done and what needs to be done by the government and by the others. So thank you for highlighting all of these challenges, and we hope our other speaker also will come up with other solutions, ideas, and how we can tackle that. And with that, I would like to remind our speakers, please, maximum 10 minutes, that you should keep that, and so that we can have other speakers later on to speak. And please join me welcoming our second speaker, Ms. Kamatchi. Ms. Kamatchi is the youth representative from the Aathiyan community in India. And also Ms. Kamatchi will be coming with Mr. Rasia, who will be assessing interpreting for Ms. Kamatchi presentation. So both of you, I would like to welcome you, and please join us. The floor is yours. Welcome.
அதனால வந்து ரோடு கவர்மெண்ட் வந்து நாங்க சொல்லியிருக்கோம், இந்த மாரி ரோடு காரணம் இன்னும் காரணம் இதெல்லாம் கட்டியிருக்காங்க. அதனால ஸ்கூலுக்கு போனாலும் ரொம்ப கஷ்டமா இருக்கு. ஸ்கூல் போனா நடந்தே போகணும், நடந்து போயிட்டு நடந்தே வரணும், ரொம்ப கஷ்டமா இருக்கு. போயிட்டு இந்த வீட்டுக்கு வந்தாலும் நாங்க தூங்குறோம், கால் வயசு நேரம் தூங்குறது எல்லாம் முடியல படிக்கிறது, ரொம்ப கஷ்டமா இருக்கு என்னால. ஆனா ஆஸ்பத்திரி போனா ரொம்ப என்னால போக முடியல, ஆனா ரொம்ப கஷ்டமா இருக்கு. அம்மா வேலை வந்து இன்னொரு கவர்மெண்ட் சரண்டே போனாங்க அம்மா அப்பா வேலைக்கெல்லாம். இப்ப கவர்மெண்ட் சொன்னால அம்மா போக முடியாது, அம்மா அப்பா போக முடியல. ஆனா ஒரு வருஷம் வந்து ஸ்கூல் வந்து தரக்கல, இப்ப தந்துருக்காங்க. ஒரு நாள் ஸ்கூல் ஒரு நாள் லீவ் விட்டுறாங்க. ஆனா எங்களால படிக்க முடியல. ஆனா ஆன்லைன்ல ஸ்கூல் பாரு செல்லு போன் பாடம் காமிட்டு இருக்கான். ஆனா எங்க போன் இல்லை, ஆனா என்னால படிக்க முடியல, ரொம்ப கஷ்டமா இருக்கு.
Rasia, would you like to translate that? And
yeah, I would like to translate. So, this is Rasia, volunteer from TYCL, translating for Kamatchi. So the following was said by Kamatchi. Hi everyone, I'm Kamatchi. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity for speaking here. And I'm studying 9th standard in a government school at Villupuram district, Tiruchitrambalam. And I'm from Aathiyan community, which is an indigenous community, tribal community from southern part of India. And I had faced a lot of struggles in my education during the COVID pandemic. We had used to, me and myself and my fellow students from my community has faced a lot of challenges in accessing our education. Even before the pandemic, like we used to go to our schools by only through walking, and when we go and come back to our home, like we usually feel a lot of pain in our legs, which like make us very tired and which let us to sleep, only to sleep. We are not able to study after coming back to our communities. and even we had a lot of household work to do after coming back from school. Also, after the pandemic, most of the schools had introduced the system of online classes, and being a very being a person who doesn't have any mobile phone in our family. I even have not used any Android phones before, and we didn't know what are the procedures to attend the online classes, and even we don't have any mobile phones. At the same time, uh, due to our livelihood issues of our parents, like they didn't have any income sources during the pandemic, that made that was really struggling to even think of buying Android devices to attend the online classes. So these were the actual challenges that we had faced during the pandemic, but still, with the support of our annas and akkas, our brothers and sisters from we tried to study with the help of our textbooks that we had. Other than that, we really struggled to study. Still, with the resilience, with the support of our. So, with the resilience, we had started studying with our textbooks, but still we are facing the challenges. So, the above mentioned passages were told by Ms. Kamatchi. Thank you. Kamatchi, you have enough to share.
That's okay. If you have any questions, we can come back later. And Dawood, please proceed further.
Okay. Thank you, both of you. Thank you, Ms. Kamatchi, for your speak, and thank you, Rasia, for translating. And let's move to the speaker, our third speaker, Mr. Tai Pelli. He's a writer and public speaker. He works as International Relations Human Rights Officer of United Confederation of Taíno People, and she's also co-founder and co-president of Carbina Development Organization. She's a local, national, and international human rights, environmental rights, women and indigenous people rights, and she works as an advocate. So please join me welcoming her in this session, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Hahom. And Taiwei tuna kena tiauno, tairika Tai Pelli, daka Taíno tekina kena borikeng Taíno a Caribbean. Good day, sisters and brothers. My name is Tai Pelli. I am a Taíno tekina, which means teacher and historian in our ancestral language. I am a Taíno from Boriceng in the Caribbean, which you may know as Puerto Rico. I am honored and grateful to have been invited to be able to address you today on this important subject. And although we have been aware, as is the UN, that indigenous peoples have been the most disadvantaged when it comes to access to communications technology, COVID-19 exposed the fact that this lack of access to technology can also represent and contributed to the loss of life in many of our indigenous communities and nations worldwide. So how do we define digital divide? And chances are that most of you are more familiar with the apps and gadgets and technology available in the present than any I could share myself. But I want to give you a very simplified explanation on what is my perspective on what digital divide means for many others in the globe. And that is that there are many people that do not have access. That for some, using the internet can mean traveling days to get to a village that has signal, as our brother, Dr. Ravikumar was indicating. Others don't have that opportunity. Others depend on the old radio system that barely reaches some of our villages or communities. As we know and continue to experience, the COVID-19 pandemic has been disastrous for millions of people. And yet those effects have been multiplied for Indigenous communities. And because of this lack of equity in technology, information that could have been valuable for their survival, medicines, personal protective equipment, supplies, they were not reaching Indigenous peoples. And because of lack of access to more effective methods of communication, many miss out on the opportunity to exchange, and this is something really important, and I heard it over and over again, to exchange medicinal ancestral knowledge with other Indigenous communities, something that became the primary source of treatment for many Indigenous peoples. And I have to clarify that most, at least on this side of the world, most of the Indigenous communities were really depending on their own ancestral medicine. This access was simply not available, and Indigenous peoples were perhaps among those who needed it the most. Invisibility, silence, yet again, worked against our peoples. The Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples from the United Nations, as well as other mechanisms within the United Nations systems, held meetings and called for input on the situation and impact of the pandemic in Indigenous communities. Many times, by the time we found out about COVID's impact in these communities, the number of deaths had been staggering. So here's where I say and stress that intergenerational dialogue, particularly between elders and the youth, is a crucial element for the survival of our cultures and that of future generations of Indigenous peoples globally. Our elders learned their stories and knowledge through oral history. That had been the way to do it for time immemorial. And yet things have changed, and we have been distracted away from that knowledge, almost removed from that knowledge that could truly save our lives. Now we have technology, and as the world becomes more and more engaged in these technological ways that change from one day to the next, that's another factor. It is important that none of us forget where we come from and from whom we come from. Yet it is also as important that our youth engage in the processes of this modern society in fields such as science and technology, so that they can advocate for equal access, utilize this knowledge in combination with our elders' traditional knowledge, and whether it's medicine, science, agriculture, language, as the doctor stated before, make the best use of these tools available in the present to safeguard our knowledge, life-saving ancestral methods, and ensure a prosperous, balanced, and equitable society for future generations. To also understand the responsibility and pride of being a functional member of this society without having to compromise our identity or feeling that in order to be able to be one thing, you have to stop being this other one. We must stand for one another. After all, we come from resilient peoples. And just as we can say we're still here, after all the challenges we have confronted with the tentacles of colonization, this is definitely a task that we can take on for the good of all humanity, but especially for the more than 476 million indigenous peoples in the world. I also want to add that as I was listening to the doctor, you know, one of the things that I had really gone to concentrate when I visited India, the northeastern Himalayas and the community of Purda from the Kasi peoples, was precisely the fact that the teacher and the grandmother in that community had arranged, and within the curriculum, they were teaching the farming systems to the students, matching exactly what was happening with their parents on their own fields. So the kids would learn that process, and it was almost like becoming second nature. I also believe that it's important that all of you keep in mind that there are international mechanisms, you know, such as the UN Development Program, where perhaps you can connect, right, and create some form of alliances to bring about this need and perhaps come up with some methods that could assist the many peoples in India that are facing these challenges. The other thing that I wanted to say, and this, I'm known for not shying away and saying things the way I see them. You know, and my honesty is not always appreciated by everyone, but I have to say that, you know, we have to think when people that are making studies, I'm talking about non-indigenous peoples, use us as subjects of study, there is no problem with the technology when they get there. Whether they're trying to do mapping of our communities, mapping of our resources. So, and now we have Elon Musk sending all kinds of things and satellites, you know, and if we can have all that, why is it that we cannot demand access to technology? So with that, I leave you. And again, Home, thank you for this invitation. Dr. Siva, you know that I'm always your sister, and it was a pleasure for me to have this opportunity to address your colleagues. Home.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tai, for powerful speaking, powerful words. We appreciate that. And with that, let us welcome our next speaker, Dr. Susithra, who is working as a senior sub-editor in Hindu Time newspaper in Chennai. She's been working there for 7 years. Her main focus is on analyzing socio-political problems in education. Besides that, also she writes on cinema, women, children, social, political, philosophical issues as well. So let's welcome Dr. Susithra.
Thank you, Mr. Dawood Mayom. Am I audible?
Yes, we can see you. You can speak.
Okay. Thank you. Very good morning to one and all. Anevarukkum vanakkam. Happy World Book Day. I feel really honored to present my paper entitled Impact of COVID-19 Phase on Tamil Nadu Students, a Socio-Political Analysis. I have shared my PowerPoint presentation with Dr. Siva Mathiyazhagan. Is it possible to screen it, Dr. Siva?
It's happening.
Okay.
It's Karthika sharing your screen.
People from your side will manage it, right? Can I just go on with the presentation?
Yes. Just you presented like I take care of it.
It was great listening to Ms. Tai Pelli. She was so sure of what she was presenting, and she has put forth important questions and certain things that is to be discussed and thought about. And Dr. R. Ravikumar was, he has actually set the stage. He has clearly explained what is going on in Tamil Nadu, especially when it comes to education and students. So I would like to elaborate on what he has said earlier, because he has made in fact, he has raised the right question, like there is need for proper intervention. So that would be the exact point we have to go towards. Also, Ms. Kamatchi from Villupuram district, she has elaborated from her own life world what she is undergoing. the very important point is not only the digital divide is affecting her and students like her. Even when they're before pandemic, she said that she has to walk all the way to school and she gets exhausted when coming back home and she's unable to concentrate on her studies. So that is the real issue that is to be addressed today. With this, let me get into my paper presentation. Let us take a look at what happened to students' community in and around Tamil Nadu during COVID-19 phase that engulfed India by March 2020 and continues to strangle us till date. After the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic in India, the first attack came to education institutions. Schools and colleges were closed immediately, and after a while, online teaching mode came into force to overcome academic challenges. Private schools soon took resort to online classrooms to bridge the gap. But fact is, only 8% of Indian homes with young members aged between 5 and 24 have computer with internet connection at their homes. When it comes to smartphones, only 24% of Indians own one. Hence, digital divide arouses a major threat to impart education for all. And we all know that UNESCO too was consistently insisting about the digital divide and inequality that is alarming not only in third world countries or underdeveloped countries, but throughout the world. So to handle this cumbersome situation, I would like to highlight what Tamil Nadu Education Department did. They took certain measures they launched a TV channel called Kalvi TV, through which they tried to telecast school lessons for right from first standard, like first grade till the higher secondary school level, which we call as +2. So they tried to match the situation. They understood that not all students have access to digital education, like not all of them have mobile phones with internet connections. There is no Android, there is no tablet, there is no laptops available for all students. So they tried to meet the situation by launching education television channel called Kalvi TV, and they also uploaded the same lessons in YouTube channels too. The Greater Chennai Corporation distributed mobile phones with internet packs free of cost to around 5,000 students in Chennai, in and around Chennai. And they too launched their own education YouTube channel that is called a GCC YouTube channel. You can even find it online in YouTube, where they uploaded the syllabus, the classes that were taken online. But yet not all underprivileged students benefited out of it, because lack of internet connection is just one side of the coin. Few days ago, I was talking with a tribal rights activist from Valparai, a hilly terrain located in southwest of Tamil Nadu. It's near Coimbatore district. What the tribal activist told me is a very important point to be discussed now. It is a tiger reserve area where electricity connection is still a distant dream for the sons and daughters of the soil. And the activists narrated a much more pathetic condition that there are first generation graduates who live in that vicinity. And it seems that they have received education through service-oriented education institutions that were run by missionaries and non-government organizations some decades ago. But their children, their successors, their next generation have no access to education today. So far in India, we have been always talking about how to raise first generation graduates. If somebody gets into the stream of education, we believe that the next generation then will climb up the ladder. But that is not the case when it comes to tribal people. We have a place in Tamil Nadu. It's just a sample I'm giving. Definitely there are more people undergoing the same condition where previous generation, there are graduates, there are people who have entered college or higher education, but their sons and daughters were unable to get education because it was certain institutions that were running earlier, but they had to evacuate because they were running out of funds and government support. One tribal girl child, Miss Sridevi, whose father took all pains to educate his daughter, put her in a boarding school in Thrissur district in state of Kerala. For a larger audience, let me explain that Kerala is a state, a neighboring state of Tamil Nadu. So this girl, Sridevi, came up as a topper in 10th board exams, which is one of the very important level of getting into higher education when it comes to India. So in the 10th board exams, she came as a topper. In spite of such an achievement, the girl did not pursue higher education because she says that I am left with no job opportunities in my place. Even if I pursue higher education, what have I got to do? I have to come back to my place and I have no other opportunities. I have no job opportunities in my place. So this is the saddening plight. This is the real situation there. Thus, even access to electricity and basic infrastructure are still problems to be addressed. Only 47% of Indians receive more than 12 hours of electricity on daily basis, affirms a survey conducted by Ministry of Rural Development in 2017 and 18. On the other hand, we have affluent private schools. I think we can go to the next slide. We have affluent private schools that plunged into rat race and started taking online classes all the day, throughout the day. So these schools started pressurizing the parents to pay full fees while COVID saga ripped off jobs of people from all walks of life. In this regard, Madras High Court ordered schools not to collect fees more than 40%, 40% of the whole fees until August 2020, but not all the schools followed it. And the state education department also intervened and they created a grievance cell for parents to register their complaints on school managements that were transgressing the verdict. Meanwhile, online education through some digital platforms, you can go to the next slide. Let the issue of intrusion into privacy. I don't want to name the platform, digital platform, where because we are using it on daily basis and for various purposes. So there was a big issue not only in India, even in Singapore and some other places that child abuse was happening through online. That is, the children who were connected online, their photographs, their videos were being captured, and that was misused by some unknown people. So it didn't have any proper privacy security settings. Now also I could find that I've been talking with teachers, professors from across Tamil Nadu. Many of them told that while we teach online, we are completely being monitored. See, when it comes to a subject like science or mathematics, you just go by the textbook. But arts, humanities subjects is not like that. A social science student cannot be just taught what is exactly given in the textbook. You need to connect with the society. You need to refer to social political happenings that is going around in and around the state. But when teachers start teaching through online, they are completely being monitored by the school or college management. Even sometimes the principal or the headmaster of the school plunges inside the Zoom meeting and raises question, what are you speaking with the students? So this kind of issues are also going on. And the other area is socializing with a peer group. That is a very important thing when it comes to the younger children. Children need physical activity and what you call as co-curricular activity. That is a very important part of child upbringing. But when it comes to online, you are completely denied that opportunity. You have to sit all the day in front of the monitor or in front of the screen and keep watching what is going on. And this has really created a very big issue. In fact, psychiatrists and physicians want the adverse impact of excessive digital usage on children's eyesight and mental health. And Human Resource Development Ministry of India again intervened into it. They issued a guidelines on a chart of for online classes, like for 1st to 8th grade, they stated that there should not be more than 90 minutes per day. And when it comes to 9th to 12th grade, which is high school and higher secondary school level, they said that there should not be more than 4 sessions, with each session not more than 45 minutes. But sadly, most of the schools have not yet come under that rules. They are still taking classes for 6 to 8 hours continuously, and children are under deep stress and depression. And this negligence of the guidelines of the HRD ministry resulted in a suicide of a 14-year-old student from Pelli district of Vikramandi locality in September 2020, and that shook the entire nation. But we have on the other side where children are completely denied the access to mobiles, to smartphones, to tablets, to laptop, to gain education, and that too created stress and depression. And we witnessed suicides because of the denial of digital platform, and that was really horrible to face. But I have more terrifying truths to present here in front of you. Like last 2 decades, can go to the next slide. Last 2 decades, there have been reduction in child labor and increased enrollment in schools. Whereas a recent rapid survey conducted by Campaign Against Child Labor in 24 districts in Tamil Nadu and Pondicherry narrates painful stories of kids who are forced into child labor because of COVID-19 pandemic. Most of the children who were involved in labor were found to be either belonging to scheduled castes or scheduled tribes. And 55% of children who took part in the survey said that they don't own a smartphone to attend online classes. So the issue is, even if a family, if a house has got a smartphone, it would be with the male member of the family, mostly. Even mothers don't have a mobile phone with internet connections, be it middle class or upper middle class. I've seen that mostly women have what we call that button phone, where they don't have Android facility. Mostly men have the smartphones. So when it comes to downtrodden children, you need not explain, you need not give any clarification that children don't have access to phones with internet connections. And since their parents lost their jobs and livelihood, the school kids had to drop out, and they were forced into child labor. Children around 14 years at large in Tiruvannamalai district are working in bricklaying. When it comes to Sivagasi, in and around areas, we find children being involved in matchbox making factories. They are made to involve in menial jobs in textile industries. Some of them are involved in making of silver anklets. You can find more number of children on streets selling groceries and flowers, and they are made as cleaners at low-profile hotels and restaurants, helpers in automobile workshops. They are made to do pot making and many more. The most painful answer we get from school dropouts and kids forced into child labor is, within quotes, quote unquote, even if we get higher education, we have no other goal than to do this kind of menial jobs. I have heard many children saying this. They say that, Akka, na vandu padichalum seri, college ponalum seri, enga oorla indha vela vaayippu da irukku. I have to come back and do the same job. So what is the meaning of going to school, going to higher education? So still the government gives, in India we have till 14 years, we have right to education, where children are given the basic education free of cost with certain facilities. They are given midday meals and other things. So after that, the children themselves feel that there is no purpose of getting educated further because there is no job in front of us. So if this news is not painful enough, next we have the issue of child marriage. Thousands of girl children between 13 and 18 years were abducted, raped, and forced to marriage after COVID-19 broke. Since schools were shut down, girl children are more prone to this crisis. And again, I quote from Tiruvannamalai district, because there was a recent happening where 400 child marriages have occurred, And most of the girls, when they got married, were found to be pregnant. So recently, a 12-year-old girl has eloped with a 32-year-old man in Thiruvannamalai district, and now the girl is brought back and admitted to a social welfare department rehabilitation center, and sadly, she too is not pregnant. She's just a 12-year-old child. So Tamil Nadu state recently witnessed, I think you have to go to the last before slide. Tamil Nadu state recently witnessed, you need to go to the next slide. Recently witnessed legislative assembly general elections in which prominent political parties of the state launched their election manifesto assuring free 2G internet data pack, free Wi-Fi facility in all education institutions, tablet with free data pack, etc. It is the COVID phase that has compelled political parties to offer internet facility free of cost as part of state welfare schemes. Besides, that is not the only challenge that we are confronting now. The world is not the same post COVID-19 pandemic. It has badly hit the poorest and the vulnerable and is having a devastating impact on marginalized children's education. And that's what I have got to say. Let's change words into action. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you a lot, Dr. Susithra. Your presentation covered a lot of aspects of digital divided, such as inequality, gender, digital divided, education, suicide, among other things. It was really informative. I would like to thank you for that. And now I would like to introduce, thank you. I would like to introduce the next speaker, Ms. Makasa. She is a water human rights activist and educator. And she has been employed as youth coordinator of global water features, and she has been coordinating community events for water security, climate change, and national human rights violation. Her podcast, Let's Talk Water, elevate Indigenous youth voice. And Ms. Makasa also, she has been led different ceremonies. She participated in Parliament of the World Religious in Ottawa, 2017. So I would like to welcome you, and the floor is yours. We would like to listen and hear from your presentation as well.
Hi, thank you so much, everybody, for having me. I'm so honored to be here and talk, and thank you, Dr. Siva, for inviting me to be with you all today. And I'm so thankful to be here. I'm thankful for all of the past presentations. They're very informative, and these stories need to be shared, and this is where to share them and build relationships. So I'm going to share my screen. Presentation. While it's loading, I'm going to be talking about the digital divide during COVID reality First Nations youth on reserves. Well, I think I like to introduce myself in the language first. Sego Serguego Makashinget Skinikahagan Yokohonjore Wakatuhuni, Six Nations Nidawageno. My name is Makasha Looking Horse, and that means Red Earth. In Lakota, I am Mohawk, Wolf Clan, and Lakota from Six Nations territory in Ontario, Canada. I am a youth leader in many different ways in my community. I'm a youth coordinator for the Indigenous Water is Life project for the last 4 years, and I have been the youth lead for the rites of passage in my community for the last 5 years. I've also a Sundance leader in my ceremonial ways in my Lakota, on my Lakota side, and for like the last 10 years. And yeah, I wear a lot of hats in my communities. But today I'm going to be talking about how COVID has affected Indigenous youth in the communities, especially in my community and in Canada's First Nations reserves. So first one is a separation from family. Like most Haudenosaunee families, their family has extended across borders because the borders were put up in our lands and they're invisible lines. And so we have extended family across the US and other countries, or in the US. And we also are, like my story, I have a father who is from the US, and right now I'm unable to see him for a year now, since COVID has started, so over a year. And so these are, like my story, these are a lot of other Indigenous youth stories and other Indigenous youth and family stories that are being separated. And it's really hard because that's our core values as Haudenosaunee people, is to be with our families. So that's really hard on our mental health and physical health. So with physical health, we have our coping mechanisms, which are now banned because these were already coping mechanisms before COVID, because we have so many issues with housing crisis, suicide epidemic, water crises, missing and murder Indigenous women, all of these other crises that we had before COVID, and now COVID has just put another strain on Indigenous families. And our coping mechanisms, like our creators game, such as lacrosse, that was actually a medicine that was given from our creator to help with these things, is now banned. And it's really hard for all of our families for these activities like lacrosse or hockey and other Indigenous sports to be banned. So what was also banned is having our ceremonies, which is longhouse. Longhouse, and for me on my Lakota side, the Sundance ceremony, it really hit hard, and these are healing ceremonies. So these were ceremonies that were vital for our mental or spiritual and on all aspects of health, and including the rites of passage ceremony. So all of these ceremonies that helped us come together and helped our health has been taken away, and yeah, we haven't been able to have them. And same with another coping mechanism would be going out and being on our lands, and like Niagara Falls and like all of a lot of spaces around our reserve, and and sacred spaces like Niagara Falls and all of these other outdoor spaces that have crowds of tourists and people and just people, crowds of people, and we are too afraid to go to those places and then bring something back to our communities, so we stay away from those crowded spaces which are on our lands and our sacred spaces. So we also struggle for our lands, and we have, like I said, we have been battling these pipelines and hydro towers and railroad crossings, all of these things like Standing Rock and oil pipelines and Line 3 and all of these things that have been happening now, and land back, the land back movement. All of these things that we have been battling before COVID is just another stressor during COVID, because these things are still going on. Yeah, basically. These things are still going on, like our fight for clean water, and our fight with corporations that are stealing our water, like Nestle and other water bottling companies that have been taking our water and not only stealing our water, but have stolen a lot of Indigenous people's water globally, including here in Six Nations, and also fighting like pipelines and fighting the movement with murdered Indigenous women. So here are the cases of Six Nations, and I wanted to point out the correlation between lack of access of running water and COVID cases and the rise of COVID cases. So you can see at the top, number 1 is the Six Nations Reserve, and we are the highest. We have the highest COVID cases in our region. And here on the right side is our boil water advisories, and we have a water crisis here in Six Nations, where only 10% of our community is hooked up to the water treatment plant, and the rest have to fend for themselves. And with our project, we have discovered that there has been multiple contaminants within our with our drinking water, and our riverways and our creeks are extremely contaminated due to environmental racism, and we are not only experiencing the water crisis, that we have contaminants, and multiple people on our reserve don't have access to running water whatsoever, because we don't have the infrastructure and we have lack of resources for not only Six Nations community, which has 27,000 people, and we're surrounded by many cities, but also for the northern communities that don't have any kind of cities around them. So we as Six Nations, that is considered a well-developed reserve, have a housing crisis and a water crisis because we don't have the proper infrastructure to hold us, and we don't have any kind of funds, and because we're on a reserve, we're not allowed to have any loans. There's multiple reasons of why we have all of these issues on our reserves, and that's the main reason, is because we don't have funds, and Canada doesn't seem to have, I guess, I'll just get that. So here's a digital story. Not a digital story. This is a podcast that has that we have developed due to a COVID response. And this is how we are able to stay connected. And even though our reserves are have problems with Wi-Fi, we still drive to Tim Hortons, or we try to implement and go to the cities where there is Wi-Fi. And we still have those issues on reserve, and it's a struggle for a lot of Indigenous people on reserve. But in my household, we are lucky, and we are able to have Wi-Fi and produce a vodcast that is now on YouTube and is live streamed through Facebook, and we have multiple guests who are activists, Indigenous indigenous people globally, from Hawaii to New Zealand to Alaska to South Dakota, and we are able to help each other and converse and able to share our resources through the online. So we use it as a resource, and that's the only reason why we need, that's the only reason that we really need internet and Wi-Fi to spread awareness of what's happening in our communities, and get the word out of what's happening. And that's basically how I think everybody knows how Standing Rock started, and that's how everybody knew, and the word spread globally is through social media. So we're able to use it as a tool to amplify our voices, and that's what Oneganos Water's Let's Talk Water podcast is about, is amplifying indigenous people's voices and giving them the resources of scientific people. Oh no. This is the podcast promotion video, so I just want to show you what exactly I'm talking about. Dang.
It won't play 2 weeks.
Okay, there we go. Okay, never mind. I'll just skip that. That's where you can follow and subscribe, or on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. YouTube is where our 27 episodes are, and we just finished season 3. So what we also have done with the youth in our community has created digital stories, and that's how they're able to spread the word of what's happening in our communities with our water crisis, and how our youth feel about their environment. And it's not good. Like they're extremely devastated and scared for their future. And digital stories is really a way how we can amplify their voices and share their stories. I don't think it'll play here. I think that might be done for, that's the last one. So yeah, sorry if I sounded a little rushed. And if you have any kind of questions, I can take them.
Thank you so much for.
No problem.
Thank you, Makasa. I think
Makasa, thank you so much for your insightful presentation. Sorry, I lost connection. That is part of digital divided issue as well. And with that, I would like to move forward for the question and answer session. We have one speaker who is not available today, so we'll use that time for question and answer. I would like to begin the question and answer here, but also some participants already shared some questions here, so we'll start with these questions. So I hope our panels will be ready to answer these questions. We have question number 1 from Zainab to Dr. Ravikumar. How can we strategize fund in real time to deploy simple technologies for our indigenous communities to stay connected and aware of safety and health measures, and to receive micro grant to digital ambassador in light of COVID-19 onward? That is a question from Zainab, and I hope our speaker, Dr. Ravikumar, can address and answer this question. Is Dr. Ravikumar available?
Yes, available.
There's one question for you. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, please tell me. Hello. Mr.
Hello,
Dawood,
welcome.
please proceed.
Yes.
Yeah, please proceed.
Dawood, just repeat the question.
Zainab is asking how we can strategize fund in real time to deploy simple technologies for indigenous communities to stay connected and aware of safety and health measures, and to receive micro grants to be a digital ambassador in the COVID-19 world and inward. So that was her question from Zainab.
Yeah, see, in India, particularly in Tamil Nadu, we cannot provide the digital access to all the indigenous people in a short span of time. So what is available solution with us is organizing a community level schooling with the help of NGOs and volunteers. So that is the only solution available to us, I think. The government teachers who are working in the government schools, they are not interested in providing education, but we can find out some teachers among them, and with them we can organize community level schooling. If you start with, in some places, it will make impact on the government, and it will force them to replicate the models. So my suggestion is to start some places, in some places, at least in some villages, among the indigenous people, the community level schooling. Segregate the, bifurcate them, the students in the street level, and send the teachers to the places, and the formal education is the only remedy. You cannot educate the indigenous people and downtrodden people here in non-formal education or online education. So providing the gadgets is not a solution. Instead, we have to organize community level schooling. That is my suggestion.
Good. The following question is to you also, and the other two questions will go to different panelists. So Dr. Ravikumar, also there's another question is asking from Ashwan. Could you suggest measures to expose, expose discrimination and problems of institutional bias in general, which would in turn help address many of economic challenges to benefit all in society?
Yeah, it is there because he is the core of the idea of the religion here. So inequality is the basis of the religion here. So we are fighting not only in schools, in all spheres of life against this kind of inequality and discrimination. So, and the various committees has published many reports how to solve the inequality, how to address the discrimination, particularly in schools. But the government is not interested in implementing the suggestions. During the United Front government, UPA government, during Manmohan Singh era, there was one a National Knowledge Commission set up by the government. They have submitted a detailed report to end discrimination, inequality in schools. But the government is not interested in implementing. I have translated the report in Tamil and published, and also tried to persuade the government to implement, but miserably failed. But from my side, I am giving 2 awards to teachers who are treating students in an equal manner in classrooms. By doing this, and I encourage teachers to practice the equality in classrooms. So this is one way, but it's a long way to end this kind of discrimination here in India, because the present government is very firm to practice discrimination, to institutionalize discrimination. They are doing all kind of structural modification to perpetuate the inequality and discrimination here in the society, also in education. So in this time, it's very difficult to fight these designs. So what we need is a unified fight, unified programs to first propagate the seriousness of the issue, and find people, find supportive voices to fight this, to address this issue.
Thank you. Another question coming from our participant, Joros Orfanan, to Dr. Susithra. He's asking a question about the statistic that you highlighted earlier. How, basically the question I have here, whether these survey statistics have been communicated to respective district departments to take an action. And is there any separate statistic available for SC, ST, and women?
Please unmute Dr. Susithra.
Thanks for the question, Mr. Guru Saravanan, and thanks, Dawood, for putting it to me. Yeah, indeed, we have communicated through media news. We have reported these kinds of news repeatedly. I myself have written a number of articles during this COVID pandemic time, highlighting these kinds of issues, and also politicians like Dr. Ravikumar, who fight, who stand for the marginalized community, have been taking it to the concerned people, to the concerned departments, to the knowledge of the ruling party, people in power. And in fact, we have, I would like to show you a book which was brought as a compilation of the situations that happen. It's in Tamil. It says COVID-19, the state of children. It is a compilation of articles written by journalists in Tamil, both in English and Tamil, that narrates what the actual situation, what is the thing going on, and it is brought by UNICEF in collaboration with Chennai Press Club and Thoramai, which is a child rights organization. So these kinds of initiatives, attempts to take it to the concerned people who are in power, who can take action, has been repeatedly done. And to his next question, like, is there a separate statistic available for SC, ST and women? Of course it is. We see that in India, there are 28, among the Indian population, the SC, ST constitute 28% of Indian population, whereas 43% of them are below the poverty line. This is really disproportionate to that population. And of course, we have statistics available, but what do we do with those statistics is the question that remains in the bottom line.
Thank you very much. Another question from Ashwan to Ms. Tai. He's basically asking, with caste and racial discrimination rising due to COVID-19, don't you think economists need to further broaden their perspectives, adopt more psychological perspective on racial discrimination, and began to examine institutional discrimination and forms everyday interpersonal discrimination that can be highly consequential for economic outcome?
A home for that question. I tried to write down as much as I could, but I really thought that the question was really important, because how do we defend or uphold laws and international law and agreements when we are not familiar with them? So one of the things that it's happening much more than what's happening with the economists, it's really what's happening between governments and corporations. And one of the things that we have found is that very seldom do they want to speak about human rights. Now, somebody can have the argument, well, you know, we have had this case system for time immemorial, whatever it is, right? But I want you to know that cultural practices and traditions are not above human rights. Okay, just like female genital mutilation, it's not. You know, they can have done it for many, many years, right? But the truth of the matter is that no cultural rights go above human rights. Now, when I say how do we defend these things, right? It is up to us. International law, it's really beautiful, but we are the teeth. If we do not use these instruments, they're as worth as the paper that they've been written on. So for example, we have the convention, this is really important, the Convention on the Elimination of all forms of racial discrimination. And we have a committee, the CERD, you know, and really when we look at UN, this is one of the mechanisms that bites the hardest to countries, and countries don't like to be put on the spot. So we need to become familiar with those things. And when we have these cases, start, you know, one of the key reasons and one of the things that I teach and stress a lot when we're training on UN protocols, it is precisely that documenting testimonies, community testimonies, right? Back up whatever you present to these mechanisms where you do an urgent action request, etc. There are ways in which you can start addressing those things. The other thing is, you know, and every panelist here pretty much has mentioned the lack of access to technology or education and so forth. And so how do we make things happen in that respect? And I want to say and stress, who do you think advocates for tribes in voluntary isolation? It is the ones that are not in isolation. So perhaps all of us here that have access, even if it's limited, are the ones that need to advocate for those that do not have that access. And how do you do that? You do that as one of our co-panelists already indicated, working with NGOs, working with the, become familiar with the mechanisms that we have available. You know, in this particular case, you know, UNDP at the United Nations, you know, it has to do with environment. You go to that area, right? And let me tell you also that a couple of years ago, we had a big presentation when it came to technology. I want you to know that by the time that the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples took almost 30 years for that to be adopted, right? And you know that implementation has been one of the biggest challenges that we have. But I also want you to think that technology was not as part of our everyday life when this document was being created, right? So now that we know that it changes like every time you blink, you know, there's some new gadget, a new something, it's important to take a look at what companies, you know, and I can tell you Microsoft, we had like a side event at the United Nations a few years ago because there were some people from Microsoft that were very interested in presenting ways and use these classes on technology and access and whatever, and they wanted to really help Indigenous communities. It was like the way they presented it to us was, how can we help, right? So these are the connections that we need to make. And Siva, Dr. Siva, I want to connect you with one of my mentees at the UN. She's very into technology and whatever, and perhaps she can help you some with this program that you have, right? And maybe, you know, communication is a start. So.
Sure, thank you, like, no, I'll, yeah, we'll discuss.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That is the 4 questions that I have. I want just to open it to the participants. If someone wants to ask any question to our panelists.
You can also unmute and speak if you don't want to like really type any questions on the chat box. Yeah. Please unmute yourself and speak.
I could see a question for me from Mr. Ashwin Karthik. Shall I give my answer?
Please go ahead.
He has asked, like, while social media is being used to share information and resources, the poor and marginalized are left helpless without access to such information. Many members of the Adivasi and Dalit communities are more at risk of missing out on information and support circulated via social media. Could you please elaborate on this and suggest steps for the same? That's a very valid question. I would like to quote Dr. B.R. Ambedkar at this juncture. The father of Indian Constitution, a great revolutionary and statesman who fought tooth and nail against social discrimination in his writing on education in 1940s. I would quote unquote. He said, scheduled castes have not progressed in science and technology and engineering education. They will benefit more by advanced education in science and technology. In fact, he prescribed the oppressed community not to choose arts or law subject and better go for science and technology in 1940s. This is something he quoted after his visit to a mine factory in North India, and he met. He is not an armchair philosopher or an academician who is sitting at home and prescribing something. He had a quite long tenure as a labor minister who traveled across the nation and studied the living conditions of the oppressed working class thoroughly. And I would like to quote the same of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar in today's context of digital divide too. Our children of oppressed class will benefit more by advanced education and science and technology, as we know that Francis Bacon called knowledge is power. Today we are in an era where digital is power. With this basic premise, I would say that though strengthening formal education is the basement, we need to empower our children with digital power. By doing that, we can take a giant leap, just like the mankind stepped into moon from Earth. Taking digital technology in hands is a very important phase that has to be done, and it can cutting across the barriers. I definitely believe that can be done by people like you and me, us coming together, in spite of the actual ruling government, whether or not they come along with us. It can be done because, as I said, as I quoted from a tribal community, they had a number of people who got graduated some 10 to 20 years back, but today they don't find children who are able to go to higher education. So need not look at this from a negative side. I find the positive side in there were people who empowered the previous generation, while none of the whole of the nation was denied education. So if people step in, things could be changed, and definitely digital power is a major power that has to be grabbed for our children to get empowered.
Right.
Thank you, Dr. Susithra. Actually, that's one of our vision to, as Dr. Ambedkar keep highlighting on how important the science and technology for Dalit and tribes in India, as well as, it's a similar situation I could see in the US, what's a digital divide gap. And then even take one example of the Nobel laureates who are getting awards for science and technology innovations. Who are all those people and why they rich indigenous knowledge is not really converted into an advanced innovations in the spaces to claim our own spaces and claim our own innovations on the mainstream innovation innovation in technology and science itself. That's a huge vast gap which we need to start with the STEM, that the STEM educations need to be imparted with our younger generations. It's not like just a STEM like where we are like even expanding that. STEM alone is not going to support. We need to have a ethics into it as well as human rights into the science, technology, engineering, and the mathematics. If there is a ethics and human rights attached to that, our next generation will be a much more the safe and inclusive innovators coming from our own communities. That's the kind of a aim which we need to work around. That's like aim we are like started to work on. Thank you for highlighting that, Susithra. Yes, Dawood, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, our discussion today has come to an end. Thank you so much to Dr. Siva and Trust for Youth and Shared Leadership Organization for organizing this event. Our gratitude to our all speakers and panelists, Honorable Ravikumar, Ms. Kamatchi, and then translator Raja, Ms. Tai, Dr. Susithra, and Ms. Makasa. All of you, we would like to thank you for your valuable insight and experience that addressing COVID-19 and digital divided. I have observed excellent presentation and active discussion. So thank you so much. I would like to conclude this event has accomplished its goals because today we thought we need to bring and hear from youth voice. On behalf of our organization, Trust for Youth and Shared Leadership, I would like to pay my deep respect to all participants also for your positive participation in this event. Thank you so much for joining us today. And for update on our upcoming virtual event, please follow up on our social media page and website as well. For panelists and participants who wish to connect for possible collaboration, we will keep this Zoom for another 20 or 10 minutes so you can stay and have further discussion. And I hope that you learned something new today that will help you in your duties and lead to a better access to digital world for youth and for indigenous community in future. Thank you so much. My name is Dawood, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dawood.
Thank you, Dawood.
Excellent. It was really, really insightful. And yeah, stop recording, Rasaya.